Little did Carlos Prats know, this day in 1974 would turn the narrow streets of Buenos Aires into the scene of an international crime. Once the commander-in-chief of Chile's army and a minister in Salvador Allende's government, Prats had chosen exile after the 1973 coup. He lived modestly in Argentina with his wife, Sofía Cuthbert, quiet, vigilant, convinced that the laws of nations still offered a refuge. They were wrong. To understand his death is to map a darker architecture, the deliberate export of state terror. After Augusto Pinochet's seizure of power in Santiago, Chile created a ruthless intelligence arm, Dirección de Inteligencia Nacional, DINA, to hunt down opponents beyond its borders. What began as targeted persecution quickly evolved into a coordinated program that stitched right-wing regimes across South America into a single, lethal network. Historians would later name it Operation Condor. On 30 September 1974, as Prats and his wife drove through Buenos Aires, a bomb planted beneath their car detonated. Both were killed. The blast was not an isolated act of vengeance, it was a signal. The people who ordered, built, and placed that device were agents of a state security apparatus that no longer respected borders. Investigators later traced lines from that smashed automobile to men and institutions. Manuel Contreras, the head of DINA, operatives like Michael Townley, an American-born agent working for Chilean intelligence, and networks of cooperation that reached into Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, and Brazil. Testimony, captured communications, and documents declassified decades later laid out how these regimes exchanged lists, supplied safe houses, arranged identity documents, and shared assassination techniques. A pattern emerged. Exiles found themselves followed, kidnapped, poisoned, or simply disappeared. For Prats, the conspiracy was personal and bureaucratic. He had been a rider of Chilean Republican traditions who opposed the overthrow of constitutional order. His principled stance made him a target. Contreras' DINA treated him as a political enemy whose elimination would both settle old scores and intimidate dissidents scattered throughout the continent. The placement of the bomb in neutral Argentina made a statement. Nowhere was safe. The murder rippled outward. At the time, many governments shrugged, constrained by geopolitics, by fear, or by their own complicity. But the trail of evidence did not vanish. As dictatorships collapsed in the 1980s and 1990s, prosecutors in Chile and Argentina reopened cases. Former DINA agents began to speak. A handful of witnesses and declassified intelligence cables revealed the transnational choreography of repression. Courts slowly pieced together the conspiracy. Orders, payments, travel records, and the technical fingerprints of explosive devices linked the murder to DINA's leadership. Operation Condor was more than a string of murders. It was a state-sponsored machinery to eradicate dissent across borders. U.S. intelligence, documentary records later showed, had varying degrees of awareness of Condor's existence. Some files revealed contacts and shared information, details that would fuel debates about responsibility and moral complicity. Prats's death became a touchstone for human rights prosecutions. Convictions of DINA commanders and the exposure of coordinated operations helped establish a precedent that even the most clandestine cross-border conspiracies could be unraveled in court. The story of a car bomb in Buenos Aires became part of a larger reckoning with the methods of authoritarian regimes. Today, the image remains clear and terrible. A married couple, driving through an ordinary city, stopped by a device conceived at the highest levels of an intelligence service. Their murder forced the continent to confront a new model of political violence, one that would leave thousands missing and families in perpetual search of truth. The legacy is mixed. Partial justice decades later, archived documents that tell the truth, and a persistent reminder that when states conspire to silence opponents, accountability requires patient, relentless investigation.